Welcome to the Courage to Be podcast with Tanya Vasallo. Before we get into this episode, I want to share with you that I'm on a mission to close the gender gap in the podcasting world so that more and more women's voices are heard. If you feel that this is something you value too, then please rate, review, and share the podcast. And in exchange, and as my way to say thank you to you, I want to give you free access to my signature course called Manifesting Abundance, which typically sells for $997. All you have to do to gain access is leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, take a snapshot of it, and send it to help.thecouragetobe@gmail.com, and we'll get you set up with access to the course. Welcome back to the Courage to Be, where we have powerful conversations to transform your life and your business. And today we have Linda Yates with us. Welcome, Linda.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be with you today, Tanya. Thank you so much for having me.
I am excited to hear a little bit about your journey, your moments of courage in your life, and tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got there.
You bet. So I'm known as the Image Energizer, and I help individuals and organizations tap into the image that they're desiring to put out there, whether it be to potential clients, whether it be to a potential mate, whatever the case may be. Putting out their image, as well as leadership consulting. I do a lot of leadership consulting. I work with organizations, helping them to build teams that can be cohesive and be high performers. And last but not least, I help individuals with their teams, specifically how to communicate one with another as they go down the road of those things that pop up. They're like, oh, these people drive me crazy, and how to kind of, navigate that process.
This is wonderful, and I'm going to dive deeper into each part. Why don't we start with the Image Energizer, and how did that come about for you? Because I think image is such an important thing, of how we see ourselves, as well as how we're being seen, how we are being perceived, and what kind of image do we want to create for ourselves? So I'm very curious about this part, and then we'll dive deeper into the other areas too.
You bet. So my journey really started as the Image Energizer when I was a teenager. In my church group, there was a woman that introduced me to an organization that was a multi-level marketing company on skincare and beauty and fashion. And so I was 13 years old, and I was basically my first sales experience. I sold my parents into purchasing, it was probably just under $300 kit, if you will, to go get involved with this company. And I was sitting there in the training as a 13-year-old, and the trainer just made me feel like I had something that was possible for me. I grew up in a family of 7 children. I'm number 5 of 7 children. I have extremely smart siblings, extremely smart, very quiet, and very high-performing oriented family. And so, quite frankly, there was an experience that I had as a young girl, even younger. I remember being with my mom, and we ran into a friend of hers. And my oldest sister is 11 years older than me, and my little sister is 4 years younger than me. And Sherry was with us, my little sister. My oldest sister was not. And this woman's name was Carol Woodbury. And Carol was asking my mom, hey, how's your kids? How's everybody doing? And they were just chatting. And the thing that I took away from that conversation was Carol made the comment about my sister, Carolyn. Wow, she's so smart. And Carolyn, valedictorian, she became a geologist, one of only 2 women that graduated from her master's class at that time in the field of geology. And then she made some comment in our conversation about my little sister being so cute. So what did I internalize? I internalized that I wasn't smart, and I wasn't pretty. I wasn't cute. And those were the conversations that I told myself, again, probably about 9 years old. Then fast forward 5 years later, I'm sitting in the seminar by this woman by the name of Tricia Kwai, and she made me believe what was possible for me, and that there was something untapped there. And I knew at age 13, that's what I wanted to be doing. So then I let fear get in the way. And I got married at the age of 18 and a half. I met my husband when I was 17, when I started into college. My father was extremely fearful. The fact I was getting married so young. What if things don't work out? What if Doug dies? What if you want a divorce? And so was this, I bought into this fear that I couldn't really do this journey that I had felt very driven at 13 years old that I wanted to do, so that I need to go get a job. So I started working in corporate America, all the while knowing that I knew I wanted to be doing this at some point. So time went on, and I had 3 children. I was been very blessed throughout my career in corporate America. I have led teams, but everywhere I went, the common theme was an organization would basically put me in front of their potential clients or potential audience and say, "Hey, Linda, tell our story." And so that was just kind of that common theme throughout my career, until I got to a point where I started having individuals reach out to me. "Hey, Linda, would you help me put this outfit together? Hey, Linda, I'm running for public office. Would you help me with my speaking?" And so again, all these little things started to point me to this dream that I had as a 13-year-old. And I then had this thought of launching my own conference. It was about 6 to 8 months before a major event happened. And that major event was my entire department was cut, a department that I led. And this company was looking at a merger with another company. And I knew that God was guiding me to start this conference. And from that point on is when I became a full-time entrepreneur and solopreneur, and have written some books since with regard to image. But image is all about everything that we're broadcasting out. And I really believe that it reflects back like the sun, and that it then is broadcasting within ourselves. So what we put out there comes back. So that was a long answer to you on that
Nope.
question of how I became.
But I love this, and I want to go deeper with it, because so this is great, your level of awareness, Linda, of realizing at a young age, from one conversation, you told yourself a story, you gave yourself meaning, of like, I'm not cute, I'm not smart, like my sister is. And then because of someone's talk, she planted that seed of hope again in your heart, but then it gets extracted, or it gets covered, stifled. And at what point do you realize that fear got in the way? Was it after, like that you start building your confidence throughout corporate? Like, how do you go back to that and realizing and having that awareness like you're having?
Right. So that's a great question. I guess it did become, as time went on, some would say that I was impatient, and it wasn't. I mean, the longest journey I had at any one position was 6.5 years. And so I changed positions. I moved up, I moved over, I moved around, right? And I guess because it was like I was always still searching. And I think that that's what I was searching for. And I knew that that's what I was searching for. And to finally have the confidence to go after that. And in fact, when I lost my position, it was 2/3 of our family income. So it was a huge disrupt to our lives. And I remember, and to that point, I was blessed to have been able to triple my income at one point in time. I had lost a lot of weight, which was a major goal of mine. I dropped down 4 dress sizes. I had also had a dream to live on the ocean. And we were currently doing that. So I had done all of these different things. And we were walking on the beach one day, my husband and I, and we were talking about, the status of our livelihoods and where we were going to go. And my wonderful husband is completely supportive and has always cheered me on. He's 6.5 years older than I am. And he has always been the one to say, I will support you. I will support you. Also, in the same regard, though, he's also had that fear of being an entrepreneur. And what he said to me, he says, "You're going to run out of time. We're going to run out of time for me to build a business. And what would that look like for us to be able to thrive and succeed and even survive?" And so, quite frankly, when someone tells me that I can't do something, I kind of go, "Well, watch me." And so that was a motivator for me. But that was the realization. I think, too, that as people, it was just a very natural way that I became an entrepreneur initially, was that people were just asking me about what I was living and what I was doing and putting out there. And I think that was a major vote of confidence to get that first client engagement. Was like, oh wow, someone's going to pay me money for those things that I already know internally and that I have sought to broadcast externally.
This is so important. The word that I pick up as you're saying all of this, Linda, is confidence. And so a question that I often have is, what do you think went first, courage or confidence? This podcast is all about courage, and they go hand in hand. It's kind of like the chicken and the egg, like, did you have to build that confidence first with courage or vice versa? Like, how did that work for you?
I think that probably courage was the first part of that, being brave, if you will, of stepping out of a comfort zone and say, okay, we'll give it our best shot. And I think that's really, so I believe it really is a chicken and egg. And I never thought about it that way. I love that it was probably courage, quite frankly, and back against the wall and everything that I've done, even as a little girl. I remember one of my first talks. So I work with a lot of individuals on their public speaking skills. So again, communication. And I remember one of my first talks as a 4-year-old, I couldn't even say the word ambulance. And then I would get all embarrassed and just kind of come into myself. And so I think that courage has been a big part of my journey. And one of the reasons why I feel like courage has been a gift for me is I really believe that with God, nothing is impossible. I am a woman of faith, and I was taught that by my parents. I saw them live that. And more importantly, too, they showed confidence or courage in my abilities and faith in who I was going to become.
That's beautiful. I love that you tap into the word faith too. There's a great episode with Amy Mosser and Molly Croker. They're two sisters, and it's on the series of Think and Grow Rich on the podcast. I think it's episode 66. And one of the big things that Amy talked about was faith too. Molly focused more on persistence, the success principles. And Amy, it always stuck with me on having faith. And I think that's such an important component, Linda, as you've said that. And you've mentioned that a couple times. And I'm curious, when you were saying you stepped out of your comfort zone in order to tap into that courage, how does one step out of their comfort zone? Because that is not easy. It is so much easier to just stay where we're comfortable and cozy. How do we step out of our comfort zone?
That is a great question. One of the clients that I had many years ago was a young girl that had a beautiful singing voice, but she was scared to death to get out in front of public and sing. She would be fine just with a couple people, but just to stand on the stage, and she had performance anxiety is basically what it was. And one of the things that I have been in my journey that I have realized that if I focus on the gift that I have of sharing, it doesn't fully negate being frightened, but it changes the focus from inward to outward. And it's just like, and one of the examples that I shared with her is, and her name is Jessica. I said, hey, Jessica, when you give a gift for a birthday or, someone in the holidays at Christmas time, what are you thinking about? She said, well, I'm excited for them to open that gift. Right. I said, well, guess what? Your voice is a gift that you're sharing. So whenever you get up in front of an audience or in front of a camera or whatever you have, think about the gift that you are sharing. And then that will turn that concern or those insecurities internally to, wow, I have something really powerful that I can't wait to share with you and give you.
That's a great tip on motivation, on overcoming that fear of tapping into the courage. And any other suggestions or tips on how to build our courage? Because you have motivated so many people in that, over 10,000 people, of 500 for Fortune 500 companies. So I am very curious of how do you motivate that amount of people and how do you build that courage?
Again, that's understanding what it is, what your strengths are, and really knowing and leaning into what those strengths are. And then to get big with your body. And what do I mean by that? To change your physiology. So often, what happens when we come into a stressful or a on position sort of thing, what we do is we try to protect ourselves. So our nonverbal body language tries to close up and it's like, oh, and it's a fight or flight type of methodology, right? Because subconsciously it is already happening. So one of the best things to do is to get big. So for instance, before I go on and get on a stage to talk to anyone, I'm a big believer in moving my body. And so getting big, Ann Cuddy did many years ago a TED talk about getting big and the 2-minute power poses before you go on. Well, it was interesting when I saw that. I thought, oh, yeah, that definitely works. And I realized I was doing that in different ways. I was going for a run. I was stretching. I was doing different things to change my physiology. Again, taking care of the gift that I've been given and by understanding what it is that raises my energy level. So that is one of the biggest things that someone can do when they're nervous or they're frightened or they're struggling with some kind of anxiety, is to change physically what's going on with their body and get big, get grounded to the earth, put your feet on the floor, put your hands on your legs and ground to Mother Earth. And that's part of getting big, raising your hands out. Again, putting that strength into your body and using that body is the tool that it is for you in your life.
That is awesome. Thanks for that tip, Linda. We're going to take a quick pause and we'll come right back. I want to share an amazing opportunity, my signature event, Increase Your Income and Impact. It's happening May 31st through June 1st, of Thursday through Saturday, in person in Santa Fe, New Mexico. In this event, we'll be infusing it with a ton of the success principles from Napoleon Hill. You will walk away after these 3 days shifting your mindset from not enough money to manifesting on the spot. You'll also learn how to get over your fear of visibility in sales so that you can have a greater impact in the world. These in-person events are life transforming, and you can now get your early bird ticket with the code LUCKY24 and save $400 for a limited time. I look forward to seeing you there. Just listen to what some of the participants have to say about it.
Hi, I'm Dulce Vitia. The reason why I came to this 3-day retreat program with Tanya was to really just learn how to manage my business with finances and impacting just my clients and overall community. And I just so blessed and honored to be able to be here and just work with Tanya. And I didn't really know that I was going to get this much out of a 3-day. So I'm truly thankful for that. And I want to encourage you, if you've never been to one of the retreats or if you want to work with Tanya, she's amazing. You really learn more than just coaching. You learn lessons and ways to do your business differently, where you could definitely get much better revenue, much better sales, much better marketing, or just the way you bring yourself to your clients. So thank you, Tanya, for doing that. And I think it's an amazing opportunity. So don't miss out. If she creates an event or coaching or anything in the future, please join her. Thank you.
So Linda, we left off on creating, making our bodies big, to overcome those fears that might show up or when we're getting nervous. But I want to go back to image. And you were talking about image before, of how, things weren't going good. Your income got cut from, and that was 2/3 of the support for the family. But then how things shifted where you tripled your income, you started losing weight. So you were kind of molding your image. You were living on the beach, which was a dream that you always had. Talk to us a little bit about how you did that and how does one start shifting? because we might not be in the best moment of our lives, and things
Right.
that we're focused on the circumstances, and then that just adds on to us not feeling good enough, or our confidence dwindles a little bit. How do we start shifting that image in order to achieve all those other things that are possible?
Well, I think a big part of that is to be grateful for what you have and to find gratitude. And if you're practicing gratitude, then more things show up in your life to be grateful for. And to also understand, what your strengths are and to have that belief. I mean, there's this phrase of fake it till you make it. And there's some truth to that. But I also take issue a little bit with that too, because I think it really starts from understanding who you are and what your strengths are and what you have to be able to give and to share, right? So it becomes mindset is just so key in the journey, and training your mind to appreciate and to really focus on what it is you want rather than what it is you don't want to happen, and be very, very clear. As I've been blessed to reach what, Jim Collins wrote in his book years ago, Good to Great, these big, hairy, audacious goals, BHAGs, he calls them, that really resonated with me because I've had those throughout my life. I had this goal to run in every state of the United States. I did 40 of them in 2.5 years. And again, it was just that idea of, pushing myself, and it's like, ooh, I'm going to do that, and begin to visualize. And so visualization, understanding what it is you really want, understanding what your strengths are, practicing gratitude, and surrounding yourself and being open to learning from others. And I think that is a really big key, is the more that you open yourselves to others and things that you can learn and share, the more that opportunity comes to expand. But being really clear about your goals is really important. And the thought of, oh, I'm just not sure where things are going to go, or, I never really thought about that. I'm just running the track every day, doing the same things every day. I'm not really thinking about the future, what it is I really want. And I think that's one of the first things that you really have to sit down and ponder. What does a perfect day look like for me? And think about, what would that look like? What would I hear in that perfect day? What would I see? What would I smell? What would I experience? Who would I be engaged with? Those are the things that for me, was the foundational groundwork to be able to work on to reach some major BHAGs, if you will, big, hairy, audacious goals.
That's great. Did you actually sit down and write down what your ideal day would look like and go through all of this, Linda?
Yes. And I've seen that happen. I've seen those ideal days come. And I've also and then I also sat down years later and reworked that, because things change. Seasons come in your life. I mean, I'm a mother of 3 amazing adults and 1 grandchild, and I'm very grateful for that grandchild. And so priorities change, and different experiences that have changed and shifted. I used to travel and speak to groups every other week. I was in a major city 9 months out of the year. And now that is not necessarily where I want to see my work to be. My priorities have changed and shift, and that's okay, because you are the CEO of your life. You get to determine what that life looks like for you.
I love that, because it's the difference between living a life by design versus a life that's just kind of accepting circumstances and being a victim of circumstances is kind of how I see it. So thanks for that share. And I want to go back with this because I think it's so powerful. Like you were saying, if just having clarity about your goals, and it all starts with visualization, gratitude, all these things. Tell me a little bit, do you sit down and write your goals every day, every 6 months, once a year? Because I do know the stats that only 97% of people don't write down their goals or don't sit down and do their goals. And only of that 3% that has goals, they might write them down. So they wrote down their goals, but only 1% will read them on a daily basis. So I'm curious to know, what your process has been with that, Linda, and writing goals.
I went through a period of writing goals multiple times in a week. I went through a very strong period of that. I am not that good about that anymore. I must admit, I am confessing that. I do have on my calendar, though, once a month of sitting down and revisiting them and looking at them and seeing, do they still apply? Is this really where I want to go? And so that is kind of my check-in basis. So yeah. And like I said, for a major period of my life, I would write them down. Either I would rewrite them all down or I'd put them on a note card and I would look at them in the morning when I woke up, before I went to bed. And I'm a big believer in affirmations. I do have my affirmations. I have affirmations posted in my office. In fact, one of my clients, when she read my book and then engaged me, she gave me this. She's a CEO of a sign company. And so I have this big sign in my office on one of the other walls that has I am in the middle and then all these affirmations around it. But my affirmations are in my medicine cabinet where I keep my toothbrush. And when I open it in the morning, I see those affirmations. When I close it when I'm opening it again and going to bed at night, I see it. So I'm a big believer in affirmations and what those things that we're telling ourselves.
I think that's great, Linda. Thank you for sharing that. And yes, there is such power with the two words I am and then just filling in the blank. And I love that I write I am every morning and every evening. That's part of my journaling and process. So I love your share. And it's so good for me to hear, and everyone that's listening, how people do their goals and visualization. Because I know for many, it can feel like, oh, well, that's tedious. Why don't I want to write my goal? Why don't, again, it's getting out of your comfort zone because the rewards are going to be so much bigger if you gain clarity and write down those goals. So there's so many little things I want to ask you about your rituals and, because you started out with, gratitude, be grateful for what you already have. Then you talked about visualization, being clear with your goals. Let's dissect this a little bit. What are some of your daily rituals that you do?
Well, when I met my husband, I was 17, getting ready to turn 18. I was my first year of college. And so when I met my husband, again, he's 6.5 years older than me. He was getting ready to graduate. Well, I didn't finish college when at that age. And I've actually just enrolled almost a year ago now. I am back in college and to work on getting my degree. And I've been, again, very blessed throughout my career that maybe in some circumstances that hasn't held me back, but I know within myself, it was something that I had started and never completed. So I share that with you to give you kind of some framework of my day. So my day is I hit my college first thing. Well, first off, the first part of my day is filled with prayer, meditation, some journaling, studying the Word of God. So that is a huge part of my life. And that's how my day begins. Workout is a big part of my day as well. And then to school. And then it is to work on the client projects that I have. And then one of the things too that I have, one of my clients engaged me years ago to launch a women's leadership podcast. And that's where we met. And I loved having you on that show. We're getting ready to release that soon. So that's a part of my day. So the client work, the school work, and then laying out what it is that's high priority for that day. And then laying out and spending time thinking about the projects that I'm working on. I'm also getting ready to publish a leadership book in the next couple of months. So moving that forward. And again, just working on those projects. Food is an important part. Actually, I have to admit, since I started school, food, my poor husband, I admitted to him on one of our last little vacations about a month ago. I'm like, I'm so sorry that food is like the last priority on my list right now. Because I believe that there's a harmony and a time, whereas, keeping him fed. And so now he just is kind of having to figure it out. And it's like grocery shopping is almost the last thing I get done and the things that I have going on. But food is important. Water, filling my body with a lot of water is really important. I understand how important that is. And my sleep is extremely important. So that pretty much fills the day. And then connecting with whether it be a friend or one of my children, That's really important to me. Connecting with my husband, spending time with my husband every evening is extremely important to our relationship. We went through a period of about 6.5 years where I wasn't certain that we would last, and I wasn't certain I still wanted to be in that marriage. But in the next 10 days, 20 days, 18 days, we will celebrate our 40th wedding anniversary. So I'm grateful we got through that period. So, and again, I end my day with prayer and couple prayer with him as well. And that's how I live my life.
I love this. And I'm always so curious of how other successful women, lead their day, how they start their day, how they end their day. And it seems like you bookend it, with these beautiful rituals and then fill it in with other amazing rituals throughout the day, whether it's connecting with people and, doing your work, staying focused. So thank you for sharing that, Linda. I'm curious, have these rituals changed for you and shifted depending on the season and the time of your life? And how have you adapted with that?
Oh, that's a powerful question. And they definitely do. There's certain times I remember as, after I had my third child, I realized, I thought, oh, if I'm going to take care of me physically, then I'm going to have to do that before anyone else is awake and before I go to work. So early morning was a very big piece. My study in scripture was more an evening thing. It used to be the end of my day. As I was a mom raising kids. The first thing, as soon as the alarm would go off, it was like, okay, I gotta go do that run. I gotta go to the gym and lift, so working out. And I understand that I have to feed my body in all these different things before I can be that gift to others around me and share and lift others. So I guess I'm a Libra, and it's all about this balance and trying to find balance. And there's some things that were going to take over at other times. I mean, there were plenty of nights, especially as I was traveling every week in and week out. One of the things I would do is these groups that I would be speaking with, in order to continue to build that connection, I would say, hey, I'm going to be down in the lobby at 4:30 to go for a run. Anyone wants to join me? Come on. And I'd have groups of people that followed me around the country that I ran with. Amazing people I got to know throughout the country and actually the world. We had several folks that came from outside of the borders of the US into these programs that I was, helping produce. So that was a big piece of it. But then I would end up being up and out really late. So it would be very short windows of sleep. So there wasn't a lot of sleep during that period, which I realize takes its toll. And it did take a toll. And then going through menopause and all that, the shifts and change that have occurred. And again, it's understanding some of those foundational stones. I don't know, Tanya, if you've ever seen that lesson of that, if, we have all these things that have to fill our life. If I had a vase and I had stones and pebbles and sand and dirt, if I put all that stuff in and then I started to fit the bigger pieces in, they're not going to fit. But if I start with what those foundational blocks are, then I could fit everything else in. And I've seen that time and time in my journey, in my life.
That is so beautifully said. And thank you for that reminder of putting in the big rocks first into our jar, and then putting in the medium ones, and then the smaller ones, and then the pebbles, and then then the sand. Because if we don't have clarity with that, and it all goes back to what you were saying, Linda, is having clarity of your goals, of what you are the CEO of your life. And so how do you want to lead that life? I want to ask you so many other things right now. Let's see, because you have little golden nuggets in there. So I want to see which way to take it. I want to go, you mentioned and brushed over in the rituals. One of the things that's important for you now is connecting with your husband, that you guys have been married together for 40 years, but that there was a period for 6 of those years that maybe there wasn't that connection. How did you identify this? How did you overcome the not wanting to leave the marriage? Because I understand, marriage is any relationship, actually, whether it's to a spouse or with friends or with kids, it's a work in progress. And so I'm very curious, because I've also been not as long with my husband. We've been together for 25 years, but the ups and downs are no longer like just a week that we're not getting, it's like when you're a teenager, like I see my daughter, she's like, me and I'm not going to name the boy have been dating for 1 month, and that's like so big, and if you have a riffraff, it's like a day or an hour. So those time periods get extended as we grow older together, with someone, whether, like I said, whether it's a spouse, it's a friend, it's a child, a sibling. How did you overcome those bumps? I'm so curious to hear that, Linda, and your awareness again, because one of the things that I'm picking up with you is that your sense of awareness and knowing how to navigate things, because everything can't always be the color of roses, right? So share with
Right.
us, please. I'm so curious about how you did it, how you became aware, how you brought in, because now it's not something that is just yourself. It's two people that it takes for a relationship to work. So please share your tips with us.
Well, that is so true. I heard many years ago that it takes two people to get married and it takes one to decide to leave. And I really believe that is true, that there's a disconnect that happens. So I would have to say that for years, my husband, he knew he was fighting to keep me, to be frank. And I was still undecided about what it is I really wanted in that relationship. Yes, I still loved him, but I was extremely angry at him. There was and there would have been years of betrayal of trust that had been hidden and then come to light. And so during that period, I was extremely angry and hurt and in shock and fearful and just all these different things. But I found ways, quite frankly, to process, to scream, to distance myself, if you will, from that. But one thing that kept us, I think, still that thread intact. I remember one time he said to me, again, I met him very young, right? And one of the things and so who was I going to become? What was I was going to know? Did I really know what I wanted? Again, I met him very, very young. I was 17, almost 18. And we were married when I was 18 and a half. So you know how old I am. So anyway, he said to me at one point, I remember kind of in the beginning of this crisis that I was being faced with, he said, if you were to meet me today for the first time, would you still be interested? And so, it kind of caught me back. And I said, yes, I would. So I think that gave him hope, but it also made me realize that there was still attraction, love. I didn't like him very much at that period of time, but there was still some love. But what was, I think, the biggest key, and if one of my kids was sitting here with me, they would say the fact that you kept dating, and our kids recognized how important our date was. And it was like once a week, whether you needed it or not. And I remember our kids saying, you guys need to go on a date. You need to go on a date, because they weren't oblivious to what was going on. They knew things weren't great. And so that, I think, was a really big piece of it. And then it came to a point, before we started recording, I was kind of telling you about my journey where I would lived and everything. And there was a point where I took a position in Miami. We were living in Salt Lake City at the time, and there was an opportunity for me in Miami. And before the opportunity came, again, this came back to clarity, right? I knew that I could be doing and wanted to be doing something different than I was currently doing. I knew it. And I went through a process of going through a book called What Color is Your Parachute, which is a phenomenal book, has phenomenal exercises in it, and a new one that comes out every year. Because one of my struggles at that point in my life was, again, I knew in this head of mine that it was like, yeah, I really want to do that someday, but how am I going to do that? And how am I going to leave a paying job to do that? But I knew I wasn't happy in the current position I was in, or let's just say I knew that the current position I was in, some things were going to happen. There was going to be destruction that would happen to me internally, to my relationship, if I didn't make a change. So I went through this process. And one day I came home from a run and I said, I'm done. My husband said, you're done. You're done with what? And I said to him, I am done with running in the cold. And so we sat down, and I was going through this book, and I realized what I needed to be somewhere warm. And so again, I laid out again, what my goals were, what it was I really, really wanted. And it's still, things were not great in our relationship, not perfect. I was still doubting whether or not I still wanted to be in this marriage. But we took a move across the country. We actually left our oldest behind to finish his senior year in high school. And so initially, my husband's work, he had put in for a transfer to go from Salt Lake to Miami. And I was going to be starting my job. So myself and our two younger children went to Miami to live and work. And that was actually a really good period for me because that period was a separation from my husband, but it was also where I was really still in life. I wasn't traveling week in and week out and escaping, if you will, in lots of ways. But I had real life in front of me. I had two children to, manage, get to school, the homework, all that. But in that period that we were apart while he was still in Salt Lake with Trevor, our oldest, before his transfer had come through, I realized that I missed him. And all of a sudden it began to click for me that no, I really want to be in this marriage. And before that, sometime before that, maybe a couple of years before that, again, kind of when I was going through these highs and lows. And there was one period in my journey there that I knew that if I was really going to go forward with a divorce, leave him, that I need to get myself right with God to make that decision. And I didn't feel like I was right with God. And so I began to focus more on what was happening to me spiritually. One of the things that I do when I work with individuals one-on-one or even groups depending on what the subject is that I'm engaged for, one of the things I will throw up is a puzzle of all these pieces of our life and how they, have to kind of fit together. And, spiritual is part of that. Social is part of that. Financial is part of that. Physical is part of that. Intellectual, all these different pieces of this puzzle. And I knew that my spiritual self was not where it needed to be. So anyway, fast forward now, I'm in South Florida. He's still in Utah. And I just missed him. I missed him. And so to me, that was an answer that, okay, I want my marriage to work. I want him. I want our relationship. And it wasn't roses after that. In fact, a couple of years, he got to Florida and, we were kind of, moving on with life. And then there was another flare up that occurred in what was going on in our marriage. And I was, he's like, Linda, I completely understand if you want to leave, you got to leave. I understand that. And I said to him, no, I don't want to leave. And I knew this now. I knew deep down, every fiber of my being, I did not want to leave, but I wanted this issue to stop. And I wanted us to be able to move through this. And we have been blessed that we have. It hasn't been all roses ever since either, but there was a change. And again, it was because I knew what I wanted, because for so many years there, I lived with, I'm not sure, intellectually, I think I want things to work out, but I wasn't sure. But again, it comes to really knowing yourself and your heart. And if there's an opportunity there, and because it is work and it takes two people, again, it takes two people to make any relationship work, whatever that relationship may be.
Was he willing to work through it too? Because it sounds like
absolutely.
a lot of growth within yourself. But, to me, there's something so fundamental in relationships. I always say there's three things. If you don't have communication, trust, and respect, if one of those is missing,
right,
the stool ends up falling over, tilting. And you mentioned before that what ticked you off or there was lack of trust. But if you can rebuild that trust again and have communication, and that's why I ask you, was he willing to, were you guys able to talk and communicate and be clear?
And that is very, very true. Trust was the biggest thing. I mean, and trust didn't just reoccur overnight. It came bit by bit and piece by piece. And again, it was an understanding of us both knowing. No, I think there was at one period when the crisis kind of was majorly erupted. I think he sat back and said, kind of, what do I want? But then I think at that point, his fear is that he'd already lost me. And I think then he realized, no, I want her. I want us. And so he's had a lot of issues to work through. We both have. I mean, I'm not perfect. Trust, I am so not perfect. But again, forgiveness is a really important part of relationships and seeing the good and seeing the growth too. And yeah, absolutely has grown. I mean, one of the wonderful gifts that Doug has is that if he hears me mention something that, oh, I wish he'd do this, this man will do it. And I've learned that I have to be very careful with whatever those words come out of my mouth. Because again, maybe some whim of, oh, I wish he'd do this. And he starts doing that. And again, he's always sought to grow. He sought to make me happy. And I don't believe that anyone can make you happy. You have to be happy on your own. And he and I have had that conversation many, many times. But his goal is to show me that I'm loved. And so because of that, that trust has been rebuilt both ways, quite frankly, because I had to show him that as well. And communication is a big, huge part of that. And then again, respect. I remember at one point in this turmoil that we're going through, there was a company he was working for, and I got to know one of the owners of that company. And I wasn't in a really good place with my relationship with him by any means. And I think I said something to this owner, and he said, Doug is a really good man, Linda. And it just kind of, it really kind of took me back, that someone that was on the outside could see those strengths that I had blocked my view to, or I was letting anger or, these other issues come in. Counseling was also a big part of that. Okay. That was part of the process. Again, finding the people and the right tools. And quite frankly, the fact that we both looked to God was huge because again, that created unity for us. And so between all those tools and a lot of prayer and a lot of dates. And so, yeah. That's kind of been the journey.
Thank you for sharing the story and being open with that too, Linda, because not everyone would be open. And I think we learn when we give voice to the things we've all gone through, whether they've been good or bad, because it inspires the rest of us of like, oh my God, I've been there too. Maybe should be looking at my relationship differently. Maybe I should look at my spouse in different eyes. So thank you for that share. That was powerful. So let me ask you, Linda, as we're wrapping up, where can people find you? Where can people come into your world?
Well, you asked me just one place. The major one place would be my website, which is Linda with an I, H, like happy, Yates, Yates, consulting.com. So LindaHYates.com, LindaHYates.com, or the LHYates consulting.com. I mean, it's basically the same link, but my website is the main spot. And I am on LinkedIn. You can see where I have the different guests that I have on my women's leadership podcast there. And on Instagram, I try and be on Instagram more because my daughter tells me I need to be. I do a Motivation Monday on Facebook. So I'm on Facebook as well.
Perfect. And we'll put those in the show notes. And what's one thing our listeners can do to live a life with more courage?
I think step back and really think about what it is that you want, not what the rest of the world is telling you, not your friends, your parents, your siblings, your spouse, your partner, but what is it inside of you? And if you don't know what that is, then start with what you don't want. And that will help guide you to figure out internally what it is that you want. So I think it's taking that time.
So powerful. Thank you for that, Linda. Oh, I loved your sense of awareness, your wisdom, and thank you for being here with us today, Linda. I appreciate you.
Well, it has been an honor. I wasn't quite sure where your questions would go in the discovery. So thank you for the walk down memory lane and the lessons that I've learned. That has definitely been a help and lift. And you're doing such awesome work. So I appreciate you.
Thank you, Linda. And thanks for your courage to share and come on out here and be open to see where it all took us. And thank you. Thank you for that. Hi there. I have something really cool for you. I want to give you free access to my signature course called Manifesting Abundance, which typically sells for $997. You can check out all the details in the show notes. And all you have to do to gain access is leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, take a snapshot of it, and send it to help.thecouragetobe@gmail.com, and we'll get you set up with access to the course.